A viewer of this channel sent me this incredible guitar all the way from Denmark. Let me tell you all about it. Hey everyone, welcome back to Licks of the Beast. My name is Nico Falco, and this is going to be a bit different from anything I've done up until this point. We're going to be checking out this really awesome vintage 1991 Kramer ProAxe, and I'm also going to tell you why a viewer of this channel sent it to me all the way from Denmark, because that is a really great story that makes this guitar extra special. And trust me, you're going to want to sit down for this one. Back in February of this year, I received an email through my website from a guy named Peter that said, I'm looking for a new home for my Kramer ProAxe. I bought it in 1991 and hardly ever touched it because I stopped playing shortly after. I think it deserves better than to sit in its case doing nothing, but I just can't get myself to sell it. Ever since I found your channel, I've been wanting to give it to you in the hope that you could use it as intended. Now, my first thoughts were, this is a joke, this is a scam, someone's messing with me. What if it's a stalker? Why would anyone want to give me a guitar, let alone something like this one? But the tone of that email came across as sincere and well thought out in a way that I could genuinely relate. So after thinking about it for a bit, I decided to reply. I expressed my appreciation for the thought and suggested that perhaps it might be worth him taking a few virtual guitar lessons with me just to get him on the right path to practicing and playing this instrument that obviously meant a lot to him all these years. Peter replied back saying that for him, that ship had long ago sailed and that he just didn't have any desire to actually put in the time and effort. He was well aware that he could sell it, but he didn't want to treat something from that part of his life like a commodity, and he really wanted me to have it and make good use of it. If I wanted it, of course. So at that point, I understood that this was in fact something that meant a lot to him. And I have always wanted a good Kramer from the brand's heyday, so I proposed a virtual chat just to get a feel for who this guy was before actually accepting. And it turns out that Peter is a really cool dude, and we had a great chat about so many things that went well beyond just music. And that chat made me feel good about accepting this very unusual and very generous offer. So we worked out the details, and Peter had the guitar shipped to me, at his own expense no less. Honestly, I was a bit worried about it being damaged in transit because it wasn't like something that I could just return or exchange, but fortunately, it got here in perfect condition. When I opened the case, I was stunned at the condition of this thing because, as you could see, it was very well cared for, and it's got no buckle rash, no chips or dings, only very minor scratches and the smallest finish crack by the neck joint, which is quite normal for bolt-on guitars. The thing is practically brand new. So I gave it a quick string change and I set it up the way I like my superstrats in terms of the neck relief and string height, and I just had a lot of fun playing with it that first night, going over some of my favorite classic metal riffs and licks, and jamming out to a few songs. It's no wonder that the ProAxe, like the Night Swan, gets such high praise because it really is a great, well-made, well-designed guitar. Now, with all that being said, it was still a 33-year-old instrument that spent a lot of its life in a case unplayed, so it did need a little TLC to bring it back to real playing condition. And for that, I took it to my guy Steve at Solo Music Gear in Vaughan, just north of Toronto. Now, aside from being a killer guitarist in his own right, Steve is also a fucking wizard when it comes to working on guitars. He's refretted 3 of my guitars so that they play better than when they were brand new, and when I brought him my $300 Harley Benton, he leveled the frets and set it up to play as good as my Les Paul Standard. So let me take you through the stock specs of this Kramer ProAxe, and then I'll tell you about some of the work that Steve did to get it playing like the killer guitar that it was meant to be. So obviously, the first thing I'm going to talk about here is the overall aesthetics of the guitar, because this is an instrument that is both gorgeous and cool looking. You know, that pointy Kramer headstock, that always does it for me. And the finish, this is the black sparkle. And if it looks cool in the pictures, live, it's even more impressive because it has like this textured look. Of course, the feel isn't textured, but the look is really special. And I don't have any other guitars that look quite like this. Whenever I look at this guitar, there's like this associative recall thing that happens where my mind is automatically flooded with images and sounds from that late 80s period of guitar playing and songwriting. It's really quite unique. Now, on a more practical aspect, you'll notice that the lower horn is quite sculpted. And on the back, the heel carve goes quite far back. So already you have a shorter scale. Then you have a narrower fretboard. That plus the sculpted horn and the heel carve, it just makes access to the upper frets ridiculously easy. And, you know, being a 24-fret guitar, that's really awesome. It's got a mahogany body in a 7/8 size, so slightly smaller than a standard superstrat, basically like a Jackson Dinky. But it's still a full thickness body, so it doesn't feel thin or like a toy. It's a little more compact, but it's got real weight and presence. This is a 3-piece maple neck, and the fretboard is a really nice slab of ebony that looks and feels fantastic. The scale length is 24 3/4 inches, so this is a superstrat with a Gibson-style scale. So compared to the standard 25.5 scale of most Strat-style guitars, this plays a little bit slinkier. The tension is a bit looser, and it makes it easier for bends, fast legato runs, or big, wide vibrato. The bridge is super cool because it's the rather rare but really awesome Floyd Rose Pro. It's a low-profile version of the original Floyd Rose, and it's honestly one of the best feeling trem systems from that era. If you've ever played an early Ibanez Edge, it's kind of like that, smooth, stable, and it allows you to go as crazy as you want on the bar without putting the guitar out of tune. Of course, it's not like an Evertune with a bar, but it's impressive just how much it lets you get away with. And the Pro has a lower profile under your picking hand, plus the staggered saddles help match the fretboard radius a little bit better. Now, the downside with this one is that because it wasn't as widely used as the original Floyd or the licensed versions, I might be in for a bit of a hard time if I ever need replacement saddles or knife edges, but I'll cross that bridge if and when I get to it. For now, I'm enjoying this bridge a whole lot. The original stock pickups are Seymour Duncan, hot rails in the neck and middle, and the high output trembucker in the bridge. That is a great pickup because it's aggressive without sounding muddy or screechy. Now, I should mention that 1991 is an important year for this model because it was right at the end of the original Kramer company's run. And they didn't make a whole lot of these final guitars, so they are quite rare. Another thing that makes the ProAxe interesting is how it was manufactured. The bodies and necks were made by ESP in Japan, and then they were assembled, fretted, and finished at Kramer's facility in the United States. So they're essentially part ESP, part Kramer, and 100% awesome. Now, before we continue, I want to remind you that we're doing a really cool giveaway to celebrate the 5th anniversary of the Licks of the Beast YouTube channel. As a way to say thank you for your awesome support, I'm giving away 3 different prizes of equal value. First, one of my signature bridge humbuckers, the Hayabusa by Corgan Pickups. So they'll let you pick the color of the bobbins, covered or uncovered, hex bolts or screws, whatever you prefer. Either way, you'll be getting a killer pickup that screams, chugs, wails, and cuts through with tons of clarity. Next, a 10-pack of guitar strings from SIT Strings in whichever gauge you prefer. They'll keep you in tune with the right amount of brightness, and they're durable so you're not changing strings every other week. And finally, I'm giving away a 1-hour virtual guitar lesson with yours truly. We can work on technique, composition, a song or solo you'd like to learn, whatever you want. So big thanks to Corgan Pickups and SIT Strings for making this possible. I proudly endorse both, and I'm really grateful for their support. To enter, go to my website, licksofthebeast.com/giveaway. Enter your name, your email address, and which of the 3 prizes you prefer. 3 winners will be selected at random on August 25th. Now let me take you through the work that Steve did on this guitar to get it back to the killer axe that it was intended to be. So first of all, the original frets were removed and replaced with Jescar extra jumbo fret wire. I find that this really improves the feel and playability of any guitar, especially for things like wide bends and vibrato. The wiring was also completely redone, so we got new pots, new toggle switch, new splitter switch, and a new output jack. The original Seymour Duncan trembucker was in okay shape, but the 2 hot rails were both completely dead, so I figured I'd just have all 3 replaced while I was at it. So I got a set of brand new pickups hand-wound by Corgan, my signature humbucker, the Hayabusa in the bridge, of course, and 2 real vintage-style single coils in the neck and middle position. So that way I can get all the screaming high gain I want, and also those nice Strat-style tones when I need something a bit more subtle, or I'm going for a more mellow, dreamy vibe. Aside from that, the guitar was set up with SIT power wound strings, and it was ready to kick some serious ass. Now normally for a Strat style guitar, I would go with extra light 9-42 or maybe 9-46 for a slightly heavier bottom end, but since this guitar has a shorter scale, I went with 10-46 as I would for one of my Gibsons. Back in the late 80s or very early 90s, rock and metal were still huge. Shred was everywhere, and players were pushing their chops harder than ever. Guitar makers had to keep up, so you started seeing slimmer necks, hotter pickups, and hardware that could really take a beating without going out of tune. What was happening on stage essentially shaped what came out of the factory, so a lot of those guitars, like the ProAxe or the Night Swan, still feel like they were made for demanding players who really knew what they were doing and what they were after. Playing this guitar always gives me a lot of joy for a number of good reasons. For one, superstrats with a pointy headstock and Kramer logo always take me back to the late 80s when I was looking up to all these killer players in magazines, music videos, and in the local scene, wishing I might someday have the chops to play like that. So for nostalgia alone, I've always wanted a good Kramer. And as someone who's a little obsessed with Seinfeld, having Kramer on the headstock just feels like it was meant to be. On top of that, the guitar looks, sounds, and feels amazing, so I could just rock out for an hour or two, pretend it's 1991 again, and just shut out all the usual worries for a while. But the biggest reason is how I even got it in the first place. The fact that this channel meant enough to someone on the other side of the Atlantic to make them want to give me a beautiful guitar that they've held on to for over 3 decades, that's an incredible source of encouragement and inspiration. When it feels like people are more disconnected than ever, I can just look at this guitar and be reminded that music still has this rare power to bring people together. So now I have a friend and a guitar that I didn't have before, and I'm truly, deeply grateful for both. Thank you all so much for watching, and stay tuned for more licks of the beast.